We're here on Thursday, May 26th at 5:30 in the City Hall chamber to continue our discussion of the budget. I'm going to call roll, just so we have our good record here. Patrick Davenport.
Here.
Mariah Parker.
Here.
Melissa Link. Allison Wright.
Present.
Tim Denson. Jesse Houle.
Here.
That's good and loud. Russell Edwards.
Here.
Ovita Thornton. She's on her way. Mike Hamby.
Here.
And I am here, District 8 Commissioner Carol Myers, serving as Mayor Pro Tem tonight. So I just want to go over a little bit about what we're doing tonight. On your desk in front of you, two fellow commissioners, there is a handout. And could you put that up, Tim? Thank you. And basically, it's the three versions of this spreadsheet that we were working on that have been distributed. All are out here attached in item 2, 3, and 4. The top spreadsheet, in the third column over, you can see the yellow, and the yellow are the places where there is not agreement at this point. My plan for running this is to go through what I've identified as easy discussion points pretty quickly, followed by looking at some of the new capital expenditures that were added, just so we have a clear explanation from each of us, and hopefully that'll be a fairly quick discussion. And then there are some more major differences, and we'll have a round where we discuss that. At that point at the end of the meeting, if there's a consensus among us, we can put forth one, and we'll check in to see if there's a consensus. If not, we will ask commissioners to work among themselves and submit a formal CDO by next Wednesday at noon to the Clerk of Commission. Recognizing Commissioner Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I was going to ask if there was a point at which you would foresee us sort of culminating discussion, because it seems like we may need time individually and amongst ourselves to work out those issues that we don't have consensus around. That was a long and convoluted question.
Well, I thought we'd go through those three parts,
Yeah.
and then we'll find out if there is a concession. We'll call the meeting to end at that point.
Just to kind of be aware of where we're getting into. Thank
Okay.
you.
So we'll have that. Okay, so is this process clear to all my colleagues? Okay. I wanted to ask Tim Taylor from Finance to fill in the items that I believe we have consensus on, and perhaps you could put them in there and scroll up, is the funding of the library request. I put out the first spreadsheet. I am fine with doing what my rest of my colleagues want and filling that out at $3,014 and $816. At that point, all of the spreadsheets would be agreeing. Also, the attorney investigator contract at $15,000. I'd like to come back to Commissioner Thornton, or perhaps someone could work with her. On that one, it was submitted as 20, and I want to make sure, see if there's some compromise there.
I don't think 15 is going to be a problem.
You don't think 15 is a problem? Okay, let's just put in 15 there with the staff attorney.
I thought Rita asked me about that. I thought it was 20. So
Okay. The next one is the Juvenile Court, and I have that in, and Commissioner Denson at $16,000, and the one for Commissioner Thornton was $16,444.
again, Carol,
Okay,
I just think we're trying to. She was trying to.
I'm just going through the process here. Okay. I just wanted to make sure there's an open discussion there. And then the last one is compression study impacts. That one I had at a lower, the two other ones that came in after me were at negative 200,000 for that. So let's put that in there, and I just wanted to see if Manager Williams had anything to address in that, for that point.
Yes, thank you. And I sent an email out late, and I don't expect any of you to have seen it. But there was a comment made, I think Commissioner Houle at the last meeting, So I want to make sure expectations are clear about what the compression interim solution is and isn't, okay? And the question was, is our new wage floor, after we've moved people to 15 and we've got a 4% pay table adjustment, does that mean that our new wage floor is $15.60? And the answer is no. So what we've done, so we have a pay and classification system, and there are pay grades within the system, and following the commission's direction to make our minimum wage $15 an hour. The way to fix it ultimately is to change the entire system. But what the amount of funds that are being proposed in the budget will not actually change the pay grades, but it will make everybody within those pay grades receive a minimum of $15. So we're not changing positions, but we're making the people within those positions, we're moving them up. So if somebody comes in after the fact, we will move them further into the range so that they're making $15 an hour, but we are not fixing our system. To fix our system would require changing all the positions so that there was equity between all positions, and that's going to be probably in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to fix. And HR is committed to looking at that further with our compensation consultants. But that's not what this fix will do. And the fix is the $150,000 that we talked about, but having a little extra funds in there as being proposed is healthy because we may run into some situations that we can address.
And Commissioner Parker, if you have a question to address.
It's more like a point of process. I feel like it might be easier because you're kind of discussing differences between different proposals. I wanted to put out, maybe we could have each author just go through and highlight their key changes. That therefore sort of like leaving out all the things that we all agree on. So
That was the process.
okay, you were talking about, oh, here's mine versus
No,
Commissioner
this was
Thornton's,
these were 4 changes to put all in, that were easy to put all the same.
Okay,
Okay?
cool.
That's fine. So.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
I have a question for Manager Williams, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Would the wage floor still be 15 for all positions, even though we have positions in that pay table below that, or is what he's explaining suggesting that new people will come in at under 15?
And I know this is semantics, but it's important. So the positions will not have a wage floor of $15 an hour. But the people coming into those positions will be paid no less than $15 an hour, because we will move them. They will come in to the position, and the positions, that floor is being lifted by the 4% pay table. And I did send you an email late this afternoon that shows the difference between some of our lower pay grades, how the 4% table affects that. It's going to take some time to actually move our entire system to where the wage floor of the positions is no less than $15 an hour, as you can see in this chart. For instance, pay grade 103 in FY22 has a wage floor of $11. You apply this proposed 4% pay table adjustment, and it will go in FY23 from $11 to $11.44. That's the effect of putting 4% into our entire system and moving it all the same. With the $15 an hour, we want to accomplish what the commission directed us to do, but we don't have the funds to adjust all the positions. So what we've resolved to do is for people who make between $15 and $20 an hour, or less than $20 an hour, we have adjusted their pay. We have moved them in the ranges further so that we meet your direction that nobody makes less than $15 an hour. So people are making no less than $15 an hour, but we have not been able to fix our system where a wage floor for positions is no less than $15 an hour, if that makes sense.
Thank you. If I may, then I would request that staff give us clarity on what the budgetary impact would be to get all those people who remain at 15 up to 1560, based on the conversation that we had in that discussion with HR staff, and hopeful and imagining that the amount left over in the wage compression line item would be enough to cover that. So I'll be suggesting that maybe we add that explicitly into the language of our final budget CBO.
Well, with the market increase in the PNP, if they were employed with us prior to January 1st, in all likelihood, they will exceed that. It's just folks coming in after that.
Okay, thank you.
Except for people like school crossing guards, they don't normally receive pay increases. Seasonal part-time people don't receive pay increases. Only the part-time people who are on a pay grade.
Thank you, Teresa. So just so everybody could hear that, because she wasn't near a microphone, that temporary and seasonal positions not associated with a pay grade, such as school crossing guards or interns, they aren't moved when the pay table's adjusted. They don't receive those adjustments in pay. Right.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd like to keep us moving because some of our colleagues have indicated that they'll be leaving a little bit earlier. So in terms of Mr. Taylor, could you make that so we can see that top row with the, but with the library, just have the library fund going, so that we can see the library fund and the other three things that we're talking about right now. Keep going, keep going.
Yeah, tell me when to stop.
There. Oh, down one more. Okay, there we go. Perfect.
Advanced Excel
Okay,
skills.
so at this point, I'd like to just see if anyone has anything to say, and it's fine not to. I'm only having a minute here. These should be simple things, and perhaps we don't even need to discuss them anymore as well. So I'm going to start with, you can say pass, I'll come back to you. Commissioner Davenport, you have 1 minute.
Compression study impact, I'm still concerned about that and reducing that budget because I think that's something that we've been working on for a while and needs to get done. And hopefully Siegel will be able to finish that project even for the, from the 15 to 20. I still just got a question mark about that one, but if, I guess through further discussion, I'll be able to understand it more. I do like the ARP funding of some of these projects.
The only, we're just discussing the yellow ones now.
Yellow ones, okay.
Yeah, the library, the increase in the attorney's schedule, the judge, juvenile judge, and also then the last one of the compression study on those right now.
And I will, I will agree with our consensus on the library request.
Okay. Commissioner Parker?
I remain supportive of the nonprofit capacity building program. I think that.
No, we're just skipping to
The
these
yellow
four,
ones?
just the yellow.
Just
We're gonna come back to those ones.
Okay, so that one is highlighted in yellow. We're talking about the top four.
Yeah, just the ones that are in yellow that have figures in them. There are four things: the library, the juvenile court judge, the attorney, and then the bottom, down at the bottom, the
Okay, I
compression
pass.
study.
I
Okay,
pass.
great. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'm supportive of that library request. I had to leave the last meeting a little bit early on the youth Cadet Corps.
We're not discussing that in this round.
Oh, it's in yellow. Oh,
No, with the numbers in them,
only the.
on the
A
right.
lot of them have numbers in them.
On the right, the yellow ones on the right.
They don't
with the
have numbers in them.
Okay,
Okay, the ones that don't?
Yeah.
The youth Cadet Corps has 165,000.
yeah.
Color the column, G. Column G.
Column G.
Yeah.
No,
just
not the
G.
whole thing, just color all those.
There we go.
Yeah, those ones.
Oh, okay, so just the G column.
Right, the 15,000, the 16,000, the library, and the compression study, the two salary adjustments.
Okay, I'll pass.
Okay. Tim? Oh, sorry, right. Oh, man.
I'll make sure you don't miss anything.
Commissioner Wright,
Yeah,
please.
so what's in the G column in the yellow with the numbers? I agree with those.
Tim?
Yeah, I feel good. And just to clarify, right, on the compression study, the work that Siegel's done, that's completed, correct?
It is, but there's more work that needs to be done to continue to look at it.
Right, under the.
And what we'd
was
like
it,
to do is come back to you with a number of what it'd take to fix it once and for all.
The compensation plan maintenance, I think is the phrase that was there for. Yeah, I guess I feel pretty confident that $150,000 should be able to hopefully cover that. So yeah, I feel comfortable with those numbers.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards?
Looks fine to me.
Okay. Commissioner Thornton?
I did, Mayor Pro Tem, no, I was going to be late, so to make sure I understand the directions clearly, it's which column?
It's G with the yellow, so just the staff attorney, the juvenile judge, court judge, the library on the top, and the compression study. Those are just the three things.
And which compression? Our
Down at the bottom, the one you put in, the same
Okay,
correction you put in.
okay.
So-
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. And Commissioner? Great, thank you. Okay, the next thing I want to do is move on to those. Oh, sorry, Mr.
Commissioner Box.
Box, Hool. Commissioner Hool.
If I'm following this correctly, although I can't see the lines on the screen, but those four amounts that you're suggesting are the ones that are basically already captured in column E and just moved over to G,
Yes.
is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, I'm good with all of those, and I sent some proposed language to y'all by email to accompany the library request, which I'd like to see us included. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, the next round, I really want to look at the new capital expenses that have been added on so that we can make sure we understand what we are putting forward. And that's the ones here on the bottom, starting from row 62. So we're talking about the neighborhood traffic calming, the matching funds for transit capital improvement grants, the additional environmental study for Dunlap and Pittard, the pedestrian safety on the east side, the corridor improvements countywide, and the roadway safety device life cycle replacement. And from my understanding of this, it was Commissioner Denson who put forth the matching funds for transit capital that then Commissioner Thornton copied over, as well as the roadway safety device life cycle replacement and the capital budget contingency. So I want to give Commissioner Denson 4 minutes to discuss those added items.
Okay. It won't take 4 minutes.
Okay, that's fine.
So on the, let's see, yeah, first one, the matching funds for transit capital, it was the #1 request from the transit department, and I think that, as we know, those local match dollars go very far, so I thought the $80,000 was well intended there. We've had discussions about the need for more funding for our roadway safety devices, specifically when it talks about pavement markings, guardrails, and such like that. So I went ahead and put the full funding that they requested there, which is almost $47,483. And then same thing on the capital budget contingency. I think what we've been seeing with increased costs when it comes to any of our capital projects lately, that we need more contingency funding now more than ever. And the request from staff was for $100,000, so I went ahead and funded that at that request.
And those were not on the one I submitted. I am fine with those, so we could go put those in there. You know, those, Commissioner Thornton agreed with them, and those are included. So let's just take those and put them over there right now. And Commissioner Thornton, if the neighborhood traffic calming at $160,000, the $80,000 for the environmental study for Dunlap and Pittard, the pedestrian safety east side for $30,000, and the corridor improvements countywide at $90,000. If you'd like to address those additions. 4 minutes.
The one that I definitely want to address is the environmental study of Dunlap and Pittard. We did have $50,000 already in the budget, which we have not spent. And I think there is some question about how much a study will cost and finding who will do the study. I've talked to Dr. Yomi of Eco Action. They have already did some previous studies in Dunlap, so I thought it would be prudent to add another 30 to that 50 and address those neighborhoods that have not or have questions about the environmental setting there. I did reach out to Commissioner Davenport. We've just been playing phone tag, so I'm assuming that he would be okay. He would be okay with this recommendation. I just want to put it back on the books again and add 30 because 50 is already there. I will let Commissioner Hamby take up the other one I will speak to is the corridor improvement plan countywide. This was work that we started in the corridor committee. So I just want to make sure that we're able to address the corridor issues for the full county, not in any one particular district. And so those were my concerns. So I'm going to let Commissioner Hamby take my other 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay. Is that, okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. The neighborhood traffic calming, we put it down at 160,517, just as an effort to get to zero for the 517. And I think all of y'all recognize that this is one of the biggest issues with that when we have neighborhood meetings, that people want to talk about some neighborhood traffic calming stuff. So right now in our budget, we have about $25,000. This adds an additional $160,000. $25,000 won't get us anywhere. It buys approximately 6 radar speed signs that are very effective. So this puts that at $160,000. That gives Tim Griffith and our traffic folks some resources that I think we've all heard from constituents that are needed. What's the pedestrian safety east side, Commissioner Myers? We noticed that you put that in as to be determined from the hotel motel tax. We just went ahead and put it in as a capital expense so that if you need to do a study and do some things to improve the pedestrian safety, I'm assuming you're talking about Gaines School Road, perhaps area, that you have the resources there for the folks you represent and that Commissioner Davenport represents to get something moving there. Was there anything else?
I think that covers it here. So at this point, I'm going to give the rest of us 2 minutes to respond. If there's some concerns, you do not need to use your 2 minutes at all. And I'm going to start, we'll start backwards this time, and we'll start with Commissioner Edwards and go back numerically. So you have 2 minutes, Commissioner Edwards.
I appreciate the neighborhood traffic calming supplemental there, because I agree it's certainly an issue we're seeing countywide with sociopathic drivers threatening the livelihoods of our children and elderly and other folks who walk our neighborhoods. Yeah, I guess I'm just, some of these things are jumping out at me new. I guess I'd like to just hear a little, I know I got an email from staff about the environmental study stuff right before this meeting. So I guess I'd just like to catch up on that. And hear a little more about this pedestrian safety east side. That's kind of new to me as well. I don't know if I missed something. Everything else looking good.
Thank you. Commissioner Houle? You with us?
I am, yeah. So we're just looking at lines 62 to 68, is that
That's
right?
exactly.
Okay. The monies for neighborhood traffic calming makes sense to me. We've also got that money in the T-SPLOST that just passed. So hopefully between the two, we can start to make a real dent in the large number of requests that I know TPW's been working hard on all year. So I'm down to that. Appreciate my colleagues bringing that in. I share some of the questions Commissioner Edwards had just to kind of better understand what these would go for. So I'm hoping my colleagues can just share some information for us on that. The one detailed question, did I hear you correctly, Commissioner Thornton, that it's 80,000 total, so it's 30,000 more than 50,000 that is already allocated?
Yes.
Or is it 80,000 total more?
It's 80,000 total. 30 is the additional.
Okay, so there's already 50,000 in the budget and we're just adding 30,000?
Yes.
Okay. I guess the one thing I just need is to understand why we need that funding, but certainly I understand the need for that study to be done and want to make sure that we're giving enough to it.
That was based on the manager's office not sure.
So I'm saying that, go ahead, Commissioner Thornton.
No, I was just saying that was because we weren't sure of what it would cost. I called Dr. Yomi at Eco Action to just give us and of course, he gave me a long drawn-out thing, but I think at least the 80 will get us started, and this has been long overdue.
And we can discuss that further, and I did send some information. It was late this afternoon. My question, though, is the spreadsheet accurate as far as what, so the 50's already in the budget, so we would not show that on this spreadsheet, Tim, right? So it really should, the net add is 30.
Yeah.
So that 80, yeah.
That's fine. Take it to 30.
So it'd be 30?
At the 30.
Do you agree? Okay.
That's good.
Commissioner Houle, did you want to add anything?
No, that just helps me understand. So, when we're trying to do the math at the end, it's 30 that we want to put in column G here.
Okay.
So,
I'm gonna move on to Commissioner Denson.
Thank you. Yeah, the 30 on the Pier Road thing is helpful. My one question is, I guess the staff for the neighborhood traffic calming, the request that staff put in for the budget was, if I saw this correctly, 40,000. So I guess this is obviously 4 times what staff requested, and I guess I want to make sure that we have capacity to actually spend 4 more times what. Yeah.
That's the one book I didn't bring with me. I'm pretty sure that what staff asked for was more than what was in there. We just had to try and make it work with the first proposal to the mayor. In the first request, the mayor gave 25, but the request was for 40,000. Okay.
For this. Yeah.
And that was with some other competing priorities that the staff wanted to spread around. I'm sure that we could find a way to spend those funds.
Okay. And then, I guess I would like some clarity on the 90,000 for the corridor improvements, just what that will actually do.
Can I answer?
And my problems aren't that these things aren't good, but then when we get to the other half of this, which is what are we going to move around to actually pay for it, I'm not necessarily there to prioritize these things over, say, the leisure services funding that's asked for. So I think to me these conversations are together. We can't really have them siloed. I don't have a problem with any of these things here, but do I prioritize them higher than the things that are being cut? Not necessarily.
Yes. I'm going to give Commissioner Hamby and Thornton a chance to clarify that corridor project, because that is one of my questions as well.
I think it's just a continuation of what we've been doing with, I know it's a continuation of what we've been doing with our corridor beautification programs, the planners you see. I know 3 of us are on the corridor committee, and last year we had to do a budget amendment, I believe, to add some more money into so that Jeannie Connell and Andrew at the time could do what they wanted to do with some planning. So last year, I think they got 60,000. That wasn't enough to get them all over the county to do some things, and so this I think will help quite a bit with that.
So to clarify, that was mostly for plantings?
Planning, beautification, corridor improvements, or whatever is identified through Jeannie and whatever she may need to help make the corridors look better.
Thank you.
And that's basically what I remember is her report to the corridor committee, and we fell short. And so we were just trying to cover that shortfall from last year to make sure that we had enough money that we did not have to come back, hopefully, to address the recommendations about the corridors.
Thank you. And I'm going to move on to Commissioner Wright.
Thank you. I'm also on the corridor committee, and I think that some of the areas that don't have a corridor-specific study, the Atlanta Highway and Lexington Road corridor and those funds, that this being countywide helps other areas that don't have a bucket specifically to it. But I also think we've added a couple of staff members in this area. And that was also a limiting factor with some of the plans that the committee learned about, and we've also are getting to ramp back up now that T-SPLOS passed on that kind of stuff. So between the increased staffing and then this also being the actual plantings, I think most notably it's the median plantings, and I think, but then there's some other stuff that's smaller, so it just packages together. And I'm good with this section 62 to 68, left column E.
Thank you. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I also appreciate the neighborhood traffic calming increased funding. That's something I brought up early in the budget process that I saw as a kind of a gap in the budget. I do have questions. Is that strictly capital, or could it apply to staff or services? Because a real need we seem to have is the need to engage these communities and actually do the road safety analysis. Some of these communities really need help with the surveys, community meetings. Our staff is spending a lot of time at these community meetings, and they're awesome. They're extremely helpful, but it is a burden on staff. So I'm wondering if this could be applied to staffing or services in addition to the actual implementation of speed bumps and striping and whatever.
Manager Williams?
Well, this is in the capital projects fund, so it would be for, things. If you wanted to create a position or some extra staffing, that would be found in operating, and we'd have to authorize that.
I mean, that's my concern, is I feel like the bulk of the need is primary, because we can't spend T-SPLOS money on staff, and we will have money coming in for T-SPLOS for some of these things, but it's the actual community engagement and analysis that is the real need in this issue. So I'm wondering if maybe we should split this up a little bit and set aside some of it within the operating budget.
Well, I will
Anybody have any
say,
thoughts on that?
on the engagement side, we are you are adding a position or two
Yeah.
for ARPA, and we're going to be looking at more ways to engage the public, with regards to the neighborhood traffic calming and the corridor improvements. Yeah, we're also adding the Vision Zero too, so,
Yeah. So you think that Vision Zero position will be a primary engagement that will have these neighborhood meetings and,
that's certainly going to be part of it. I just don't know your vision for the neighborhood traffic calming, helping folks fill out surveys and things of that nature. We'll continue to be proactive, but
yeah.
I don't know if that will be the primary purpose.
It's just been a real inequitable process when you have neighborhoods that are highly educated and wealthier and, have people who are engaged and going door to door as opposed to neighborhoods that aren't as politically empowered and might have a lot of rental properties and things like that. Those folks aren't getting the speed bumps they need.
Thank you, Commissioner Link. I'm going to move on to Commissioner Parker.
Yeah, I also had those questions about staffing and if we have the staff capacity to actually undertake that increased level of traffic calming work. So I feel like we've kind of talked about that this far. But one question I have, perhaps for my former fellow members of LRC, but perhaps also the manager's office, is that I have seen a number of requests come through that did not meet the threshold for traffic calming because it's less than 85% percentile speed or less than 300 cars a day. And so putting more money into this, if a lot of streets are still not going to qualify and people are still going to feel like they are being left out of this, is maybe, I have no problem with this. I just wanted to highlight this as not a comprehensive solution to that particular issue. And so I guess my question is, we have those parameters in place in order to sort of rank which streets get priority because our funding is limited. And so with that, would there then be more room to bring in more streets that may not meet that threshold for traffic calming investment? Or would we have to go back and redo the policy to let more people be to qualify?
Well, isn't there a backlog of places to?
I'd have to check.
It's my impression there's a list that we're trying to work through.
I do know that-
When we rewrote the policy, we did create some discretion for Tim Griffith to allow for traffic calming when it doesn't meet that bright line, when there's a set of special circumstances like proximity to a school, neighborhood density. So I know it's not as rigorous as it's not as bright a line as it used to be. There is some discretion for Mr. Griffith to allow.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. May I direct the manager to actually send us an email with how many are in the hopper, how many applications are actually in the hopper right now?
Just 60 seconds on that. So the committee did revise a policy, I think, about a year ago. And I know that because there were several commissioners that came in with a whole bevy of requests right after that. And then the speed studies weren't done until the fall, when school's back in session, when we get a full and more accurate representation. And so I think they've sort of been prioritizing those. So I think there are going to be projects that there may not be funding for that this funding could be used for.
And from my experience, I think we do need to look at the policy because there's some issues I'll talk to you.
Yeah,
I'll talk with you about that.
Oh, yeah,
that
that's
you
gonna
may
be a conversation
seeing
for a
as well.
later time, just because it's not specifically to budget, but this raised a question that I think we should come back to.
And Commissioner Parker, I would advise that to go back to committee if y'all want to revisit that.
Sure, and I'd like to reach out to Mr. Griffith about that subjectivity in deciding, like if there's a backlog, if it might be routine to just keep it where we are now, rather than sort of
All right.
utilize some of that language we had in there. I'm trying to think if there's something else here. Oh, again, I'm supportive of the Dunlap and Pitter Road environmental study. I just wondered if we have engaged the EPA at all to see if federal funding or, scientists on their end could be engaged to do that work as opposed to funding at the local level. But I don't mind setting aside that money in the budget, and then if that is a possibility, then that's just funds saved at a later date. But just a recommendation to my fellow commissioners that are worried about, who are spearheading this, let me say.
Thank you, and there is we just received a lengthy piece on that whole question.
Okay.
That I barely had time to process, so there's a lot of information there. There's probably a page and a half. I'm going to move
That's all I
on to
got.
Commissioner Davenport.
Just the capital budget contingency, I think is a good idea, but do we have 2020 SPLOST funds allocated for that? I'm not sure, to cover increased costs of any of our capital projects that we have to, so this would be in an additional $100,000 to what we have in our 2020 SPLOST?
Which line item?
The
68.
Well, we usually carry contingency because sometimes things crop up that weren't a line item budget. Probably the most stark example was about 6 or 7 years ago when the cornice of the courthouse was discovered to be rotten, and it was a $600,000 job, and so we had to come in with contingency money to take care of that. So we usually keep a little bit of unassigned capital budget contingency just in case something comes up that we can put those funds towards.
But what I'm saying, like for our T-SPLOST and our SPLOST, our 2020 SPLOST projects, do we have contingency funds allocated?
Now, each of the SPLOST projects are for designated projects, not just for no contingency. Now, are there extra funds within SPLOST 2020 from unallocated interest or higher than expected revenues? Yes, but they would have to be assigned to one of the approved projects.
Okay.
So we don't have a general contingency line item that could go for all capital projects from T-SPLOST or SPLOST, to answer your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to make a response here as well, and for my 2 minutes, and I'm starting hopefully faster. Actually, the pedestrian, I appreciate greatly you putting there, I think that needs to be changed to East Side Corridor improvements, and that's probably why, so it was recorded from the staff as that, which is why I didn't follow through on it. So I would ask that you change that to East Side Corridor improvement. And there has been interest from a lot of residents on the east side in the Gaines School, from down that corner by Lowe's to Kroger's. A lot of people feeling that there has been no attempt to create a sense of place and beautify that, and there's a group meeting starting to meet right now. So, in my mind, this would be some funds to further a plan that would then be ready for that group to make grant requests or apply to T-Splost and so forth. And that's all I have to say on that. I'm not responding to those, but to say that the next thing I want to look at here, and I'd say that these are items that it sounds like there's a lot of interest from us and in different places in here, and I don't see any major disagreements here, whether or not the funding is there, how much, and where else the funding will come from. Maybe, I think, what Commissioner Denson was referring to. So at the last point I want to go, and I'm going to start with Commissioner Hamby so that if he needs to leave, he can. The last section to look at really has to do with some of the more major issues where I think as much as anything that there's some differences in the funding than an overall, with the exception of the nonprofit, okay. So there are four, I'm going to give everyone 3 minutes, they can talk on this, and we're going to start over here with Commissioner Hamby. But really what we're talking about is the neighborhood leaders, and there's a question of the amount to be funded, which I think there's a little bit difference in there, but then a major issue, a difference is that in the spreadsheet submitted by Commissioner Thornton, that was coming from American Rescue Plan funds. The Youth Cadet Program, which is something that there's still some discussion on. The Nonprofit Capacity Programming, which my and Commissioner Denson's spreadsheet had in it, and I think yours had removed that from there. And then the Leisure Services Master Plan and the Leisure Services Capital, where is that? That's down there. Capital funds, which I believe were removed from the budget in the version that you gave. So I want to address those differences here, and then after we go around there, we'll sort of come back to process and see if there's any way we could come to a consensus or we need to move forward and develop the different spreadsheets. And I think we can do that, get through that. So we'll start with, I'm giving everyone 3 minutes here. Again, the items that really we're discussing, just repeat them, are the neighborhood leaders, the amount and the funding source, the Youth Cadet Program, the funding source, the nonprofit capacity building, whether to have it or not, and perhaps funding source, and then the Leisure Services Master Plan and capital projects. Because those are the major differences I see between these spreadsheets that have been submitted. So, Commissioner Hamby?
Okay. I think I followed you there. So I'll start with the neighborhood leaders, moving it to our ARPA dollars. It kind of fits out. Last year, I believe we used some of the money, some of those dollars from ARPA to help fund the neighborhood leaders. So this is being consistent with that. And perhaps, I know we've got some of the contingency dollars that are there for ARPA. This is just a way to help us with our budget this year. The youth cadets, the same thing. I know we've got some youth development money. I thought the folks that came and visited us with us last week made a good case for us trying it at least to see where it may go from that standpoint. In the spirit of negotiating or compromise, I don't mind the nonprofit capacity building, but I do see that it is a perfect fit to come from ARPA dollars from that standpoint, if that's helpful. And I still contend, though, that looking at the Leisure Services Master Plan, I know the mayor sent an email today saying use ARPA dollars. I'm in the spirit of compromise. I'll be glad to. I don't know that we need it, to be honest with you. I'll say this about our leisure services. I mean, we're here every Tuesday, and our leisure services is getting some award after another. So I kind of feel like the consultant that would be helping us with a master plan is looking at Athens as a way to help their other clients do the right thing. I feel like we are doing the right thing already, but if, if it helps move this along, I'm not going to follow my sword on that. If it can't come from the ARPA. The leisure services, parks and recreation maintenance, this goes to some of the questions y'all were asking too about the neighborhood traffic, and I get that. I will say this about the neighborhood traffic, and then I'll make my point about leisure services, and I'll pass it along. With the neighborhood traffic, it costs us like $10,000 just for one speed hump. So that pays for, 16 speed humps. So anyway, that point. So I do think there needs to be more money in there. I will say this about the allocation for the parks and recreation. There's SPLOST dollars in there, and that SPLOST dollars for this year totaling $450,000. And our general fund budget is giving, $2.2 million. So if you got SPLOST dollars coming at the same time, you got general fund dollars. The whole point of SPLOST is to help, and T-SPLOST is to help take some pressure off of our general fund and our budget, and this is a way to do that. I mean, our lease service is going to be spending $2.2 million this year. It's going to be spending $700,000 next year, and there's no reason why we couldn't move up the SPLOST programming for leisure services if they need additional dollars beyond that. So we control the schedule of that, so we can change that if we need to. Is that good?
Great, thank you. Commissioner Thornton?
I hope I remember
I forgot the neighborhood leaders.
the questions. The Youth Cadet Corps, I was not in favor of it until I heard the presentation last week. I was trying to look at ways that we could relieve our general budget. So I think that since the Youth Cadet Corps will be almost like a pilot, moving that request to the American Rescue pot of money makes sense to me. And then based on its success, we can review it again, budget time, and see if that is a great spend on our general budget. I think we piloted a lot of stuff, and maybe we don't get enough reports on a regular basis to know how things are progressing or regressing. I'm starting to get very uncomfortable funding things when I do not see a plan, and that was my concern about the nonprofit capacity building. But Manager Blaine did resend an overview of the nonprofit capacity building, and we talked this afternoon, and he addressed some of my concerns. And my concerns are, we don't need people coming from Timbuktu trying to train our nonprofits, and that we should use people or reach out to people or RFP people that actually have had experience. I want to make sure that we have trainers that look like a majority of the people in the nonprofit world that looks like them. And I also would like to think that we do such a good job of training these nonprofits that we create a peer-to-peer training, that people who learn and benefit from this become trainers for other people will relate to people that they're comfortable with. And my last thing, if people are going through this training, there's no guarantee they're going to get a grant. That's not promised. But if we had a metric system with like CDBG or division that you rate people, they get an extra couple of points because they've gone through the training, that would be valuable. that was my concern, and I think I talked it over with Manager Blaine, that we have expertise in our community and people who look like some of the folk that they'll be training, and that if we could develop a peer-to-peer training program, it will carry on. So my opinion on that one has changed. I do support
Thank you.
that.
And Manager Williams, just for clarification here, if that program, that would be a agenda item that would come before us for approval, is that correct?
Ultimately, yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Edwards, your 3 minutes.
I'll pass.
Okay, Commissioner Hool.
Hello from the box. Yeah, so I want to take heed to the mayor's words and make sure that we include the funding for Leadership Services Master Plan, and also recognizing how woefully behind we are on capital projects in many departments, including Leadership Services. I'm hesitant to cut those entirely, but I'm open to using ARPA money for some of those one-time expenses, at least, perhaps the master plan. I'm really hesitant to use ARPA money for things that we expect to be funded ongoing. And to that end, when we start talking about the Neighborhood Leaders Program, I think it's important that we keep that in our budget and not move it to ARPA. So that's probably my biggest hesitancy of what I've seen kind of expressed as a difference of opinion on these different proposals. So I just want to noise in the background here. And as far as the Youth Cadet Program, I agree with removing it from this budget and would hope that we can get another round of RFPs out for some of that ARPA money for youth development and violence prevention. And I want to really emphasize that it's youth development and violence prevention. And in this next round, allow government agencies and departments to be eligible. It's not just ACCPD who has some good ideas, also the District Attorney's Office, CCSD, and Leadership Services. So I don't know if that looks like another round specific for government agencies, so they're not, competing against nonprofits, so to speak. But I think it's important that we find a way to get that money back out for consideration soon. And I think that would be an appropriate place to move that project. So not wanting to, exit entirely from consideration, just look at that as a funding source for that to get started. And I think that's about everything I had for reading the line items that you want to focus on correctly. I believe that's all of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, no, nonprofit capacity building, sorry. I'm open to us exploring ARPA as a source for that, but I really want to make sure that we move forward for that in some fashion. So I'm hesitant to move it to ARPA, at least entirely, without a stronger understanding of how much of that money we would need to sustain year after year. But my current inclination is to actually leave it in the existing budget as it is. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Hool. And moving on to Commissioner Denson.
Yes, thank you. And to start, I have a question to Commissioner Thornton on their budget line for the neighborhood leaders. It says in here to use option 3, which is going to be the one that has the pay raises, everything at the 1.03. But then in the actual numbers, y'all have just 750,000.
I actually went with number 3. I'm going to turn this over to Commissioner Hamby. My recommendation was number 3, and primarily because, and now we also found out that the neighborhood leaders may or may not be able to use ARPA funds, but because that extra money that they get from DFACS is not guaranteed, they won't vote on that until October. So that's why I went with option 3.
Well, yeah, I guess my question is then on the spreadsheet, that number needs to be changed from 750,000 to
It's
1.032 million.
I can answer that. It's actually just being reflected as part of the general fund budget. So in the general fund budget is $750,000. So if you take a reduction of the $750,000, that's what that's saying. The ARPA dollars are a totally different budget that it would come out of. So I don't know that you need, it's
Okay.
it's not reflected here, but it's understood to be coming from ARPA's, the way it's listed there. The same with the cadet program and such as that, so
Okay.
if that makes,
Okay,
that helps.
but then I guess,
Showing a net reduction.
for our decision making though, we need to realize that the impact on ARPA from those things, I mean, it's adding up just those two items, that's gonna be 1.2 million.
Right.
And if we were to include, I hear way too many things being thrown out that we can spend money on ARPA.
Well, we do have $60 million or $50 million.
We actually
Not
already voted
now. Not now.
we voted to spend that money, almost all that money already, and so our contingency, which we just pulled out another 1.73 because of the Bethel, so I mean, that brought our contingency down to 2.8 now. I mean, so this is definitely quickly eating away at our contingency.
All right.
I didn't mean for that to come out of contingency, per se, Commissioner. The neighborhood leaders do a little bit in all of those pots of money that we did set aside. They do homeless work, they do housing work, they do youth development work. So I was being a little bit creative, thinking that we could take portions, and I did run that by, we kind of bounced it off when I talked to the Mayor Pro
Okay.
Tem today. So just as another option.
Yeah, just, do you have anything else to say on any of the others, Commissioner Jensen?
Yeah, no, well, I get that this is different, but I think that we need to be thinking about this, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if we make
Oh.
this decision, but we're also deciding that we're going to have neighborhood leaders, then what we're actually choosing to do is to spend ARPA money.
Right.
And so I think it's very important for us to be understanding there's multiple decisions being made here, not just these numbers. So I guess on that, yeah, I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think it's a good idea for us to be using ARPA funds for neighborhood leaders. And yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to do possibly the one-time expenditures, kind of like Commissioner Hull said, on the Leader Receivers Master Plan. I also am not comfortable at all cutting, I do not want to cut $450,000 from Leisure Services Life Cycle, as staff is always saying, and Commissioner Wright's always saying, about what's the phrase?
Repair what's there.
Repair what's there.
Right.
So I don't think it's a good idea for us to cut $500,000 for repairing what's there. And so, yeah, I don't want us to start getting just really willy-nilly with the ARPA funds when we have these other budget options that kind of show that we can do so without having to do that, so.
Thank you.
All right.
Commissioner Wright?
Yes. So the three topics right now, the neighborhood leaders, I am comfortable with that going in ARPA because that program is already going and we don't have to worry about startup time with it. It would just keep going with the ARPA funds. But I do agree it's time for us to see a chart and how the ARPA chart funding looks with the, in the years type out. So we can be processing that maybe this week with the different moving around that we're doing. I like the idea of that, but I also agree that we need to see it to make sure it's not jeopardizing other things or that those, as Commissioner Denson said, it's already out. So let's just get that in front of it, all of us current. The youth development idea of the cadet corps, I think is perfect for ARPA as well with the pilot of it and us being able to, it had a very detailed plan that they had put together for last year. But that's sort of kicking that down the can by not having it in the general fund that we have to decide by June. But that would be in further discussion for the youth development funds and violence prevention. And then the nonprofit capacity, I see where that would work with the ARPA as well. But funding them is one thing, but I do agree that we should fund all three of those. And we can decide best once we see that other ARPA chart.
How about the Leisure Service Master Plan? And
That's one of them too? I didn't
Yep,
have that
yep,
one written
yep,
down.
that's- yeah.
The master plan, if the mayor has put the idea of that as a one-time thing out of ARPA, and if that fits, that's further in that new chart. But I agree that we do have experts already here, and if they just need the time and them have to not work on something else so that they can be doing the master plan as a priority, I don't understand, I obviously don't know the workflow priorities there, but they do seem to be experts in the field versus contracting it out. What else? What's the other one, Carol?
The life cycle, the Leisure Service life cycle, the 400.
Yeah, let's do it wherever we can. I didn't have that one marked down to comment.
Okay. Great, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Wright. Moving on to Commissioner Link.
Yeah, the Youth Cadet Corps, I know the presentation we got it was kind of divided in two with a lower amount for the younger program and a higher amount for the older program. And I had to leave early, so I didn't get a chance to propose this, but I propose that we fund the younger cadet program and then ask them to present to ARPA, through a future RFP, which I presume we're going to be doing to distribute more youth development funds. I'm a little reluctant to go ahead and fund the whole program regardless of the source offhand because it is a brand-new program and it's untested. So I feel like this would kind of get it started and engage the interest in the community, and it would give them a little kind of a leg to stand on when they might submit a proposal for ARPA funding that would go through the regular vetting process that includes a citizen committee. So that's my thing about that. I'm in favor of a leisure services master plan and certainly in favor of the leisure services life cycle improvements. I feel like those are absolutely necessary.
Thank you. Commissioner Parker.
One thing I'll say broadly about use of ARPA funds for some of these initiatives is that a lot of them are, I guess, conceivably ongoing. And so the increased amount of funding for neighborhood leaders is not just for this year. We're presuming it'd be for 4 years, which is then $4 million. Another example is the Youth Cadet Program, which at $165,000 a year is over $500,000. And so thinking what we're committing ourselves to doing that now, without going through the process that we described for designating funding, talking to the community, having these meetings that we had envisioned. We had a lot of people who requested us to delay passage of our ARPA framework because they wanted more input. And so I don't know how comfortable I feel just designating these funds for these purposes in the way that is proposed here. I do think that anything that we desire to see funded through ARPA does need to go through a competitive process like anything else in order to have that transparency. And so, yeah, just general feelings on funding things with ARPA money. Also, with the prosperity package, I regularly hear people say that it felt like it just disappeared because we just decided how to spend it. And so I don't want that same case to be true here where, we just keep designating things without really consulting folks and suddenly it's all gone. With regards to leisure services, we're at a period where the conversation in the community is dominated by discussions of youth development and particularly ways they would like to see leisure services improve. And I think leisure services has really stepped up this year to get more community input and do more education around programming. But it wouldn't make sense to me to cut funding for their master plan and keeping up their facilities at a period where this has been deemed so critical to communities losing young people. So I would like to see those funded through the general fund. I also think, talking about nonprofit capacity building and the fact that certain nonprofits have not had equitable access to local, state, federal funding before. It's been a very large part of our conversation for years now. So I would like to see that funded in the general fund as well. I think that kind of touches on everything. I think that if we are going to move anything to ARPA, it needs to go through a transparent and competitive process. But yeah.
Thank you. And Commissioner Davenport.
Okay, so I support leisure services. The award winning for a reason. I think it needs to come out of general fund, fully for the life cycle as well as the master plan. It's a great asset for our community. No one talked about eliminate the assault rifle project. I think we did a work session months ago about how some people in our community are outmatching our police officers. So I think that's at least a discussion that I'm really interested in having. The Can you scroll back down? I was very, sorry about that.
The neighborhood leaders.
Yeah, neighborhood leaders. So I still stick with the fact that I think the neighborhood leaders needs to be restructured, and it's already coming out of, federal dollars now, that using opera funds for that, for next year and taking that out of our general fund would be advantageous to, saving some funds from our budget, but it is a long-term process, but I think restructuring it is definitely needed where we can save some money. I'm in favor of Youth Cadet Corp going into opera, maybe out of general fund. I think it's a unique program that has been shown across the country that's been successful. And what was the other thing? I'm not missing. Oh, the nonprofit capacity. So we talked about this in the past years ago about how we have a lot of nonprofits out there that never get CDBG funding, that never gets to the level of interest from our community because they don't have the capacity and the wherewithal to do the licensing and et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a huge benefit that we keep that into our general fund, but I'm not. Yeah, I think that's a huge benefit for us to give some of these smaller nonprofits the level playing field. So I would like to keep that in the general fund.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to give myself 3 minutes as well. Covering these items, the leisure services, master plan, and life cycle, those are things I do not want to cut from the budget. I would possibly be open for the leisure services master plan because it is a one-time thing to move it to the ARPA funds. And the nonprofit capacity, I think that's really important as we are doing more and more work through the different federal grants and other monies we're getting, working with a lot of nonprofits that our staff have put in a lot of hours supporting nonprofits, which is wonderful, but we need the funding to do that, and I look forward to sort of an official, agenda item down the line. The Youth Cadet Program, I'm willing to compromise some on that, but my gut feeling on that is to have it go through the competitive process of youth development through the ARPA funds. And that also gives it a way to sort of present itself better. There were questions that I still had about it after reading all the things today. And then, then maybe you'd have a year or two, of evidence to go on and be further funded as a long-term project. So that's that one. And the neighborhood leaders, I am for keeping that in the general budget. I think it's a large ongoing expense to move to the ARPA funds. So I don't want to do that. I do agree, we've had some discussions about making sure that we, in the prosperity package, Commissioner Thornton and I talked about, talked about like doing a real deep review and making sure that we're all this is a big investment from the county, and we need to be looking at that closely. So I think we want to do that. I again do not feel good about putting a lot of things into ARPA from in this budget that we're looking at, and I think really the main reason why some people might be looking to ARPA is to relieve the funds from the general funds to increase the decrease in the millage rate. And I understand that, but I did some close looking at my own house that falls into the median income assessed at $220,000, and compared the millage rate on my house with the millage rate that Tim Denson put forth in his Commissioner Denson's chart with the one in Commissioner Thornton's, and the difference was from $1,022 to $1,009. So what we're talking about is a $13 a year difference for me, and that's going to be done by using the ARPA funds and then cutting out some of the leisure services things. So I'm not, anyway, that's my final point. My time's over. Okay. So at this point, oh, yes, you can go.
Yeah. I support the Youth Cadet Corps we have a 28% vacancy rate among the police. I would like to see greater recruiting success among our local population. I believe in community policing, and I was convinced by the presentation at our last hearing that this program would address that need for our police and for our community to be represented on the police staff. The fact that we have one black female police officer in this community troubles me, and I think maybe we should do something about it. And I see this program as a possible way for the police to work more intentionally in our school system, within our community institutions, to recruit from local. So I would encourage my colleagues, this is $165,000. I mean, this is not a major expenditure here. You know, I don't know why we haven't heard from more community groups. I mean, wasn't there a PAC somewhere that supported the police? Did they just fold up shop? I mean, where did they go? You know, we hadn't heard from them, but we have heard from the police officers themselves explaining that this could be a beneficial program. I guess I never really understood why people just show up when they want to score a political point, but when the chips are down and the money is going to be allocated to help our police, they disappear.
Preach. Don't preach. Like,
So-
you good, man?
And I would like to continue my support for the neighborhood traffic calming program, because it's my understanding, working with staff, that there are many requests that have come through due to this policy revision. And we have a tremendous community need for safe public spaces, for people to navigate safely. And cars are speeding through. They've always sped through, haven't they? But maybe we just notice it now because we got to spend more time outside to survive. So let's make our streets a little bit safer for our community with this traffic safety program. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. On that, I'd like to ask Manager Williams if he would share with us tomorrow or some other day that when I read all the other information on the police, the cadet program, and it says it's a reestablishment of a program, so perhaps we could have some information about the program in the past. I also wanted to just briefly address for the audience as well the mention of the assault weapon, because we're not eliminating the assault weapons. We're eliminating the repurchasing of ones this year to upgrade them. So I want to make that just clear for the public. So that's what that's about there. At this point, we've sort of laid out all these things in here. I feel like we have a consensus on many items in here, but there are still some that need to be worked out. At this point, Commissioner Denson, since you're, I'm trying to think, let me just put this here. Do you think we have a consensus to put something through together? Should we give ourselves time to work through these? Are we nodding heads? We need more time outside of, we know where the differences are, right? We've laid them out. We can talk with each other about these things. And I think at this point, I'm gonna give everyone a minute to talk and go around. So at this point, I'm just gonna give everyone like 2 more minutes, final minutes to say anything. And if you think you can pull one consensus together, I'm gonna let you work on that outside of this. Otherwise, we'll say to get the CDOs to the Clerk Spratland by next Wednesday at noon. So I'm going to start with Commissioner Thornton. If you want to add anything else for the good of the discussion, we welcome that at this point for 2 minutes.
I don't see much difference. I think the biggest difference is what part of money stuff comes from. And I think that I guess I'm very strong, or feel very strongly about using ARPA money because I really was not happy about the process that we came up to designate ARPA money. So I don't have no real strong objections. I think that we all feel, majority of us feel good about the library. The majority of us seem that we feel good about the police cadet and what dollar, but what pot it comes from. The capacity, nonprofit capacity, I'm good. I think where we can use ARPA money for things that we have not done, it would be a pilot. So when we come back with our next year's budget, we can say, wow, this was good. We would not lose any ground. And I still feel strongly about, yes, my intentions, I was one of the folk that really wanted to move as much money as possible to ARPA that Treasury guidelines will allow us, so we could at least make a statement to this community that we've heard them about the military, whether it's $12 or whatever. I do think that folk feel like they're paying and not getting anything for their tax dollars. So I'm good. I hope that, I don't think we're going to settle anything tonight if that's what you're asking, but that's where I stand. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Commissioner Thornton. Commissioner Edwards?
I would support using ARPA for the nonprofit capacity building, because what we're trying to do is use these funds to support organizations that have been traditionally excluded from this process. So we have a pot of money that we have put goals and objectives behind where we'd like to see it funded, but perhaps we could be more intentional about the groups and organizations that we would like to see eligible for that funding. And this type of model has been successful before. I know in the Hartsfield Airport in Clayton County was expanded with the international runway. Clayton County created a similar program to nonprofit capacity building to ensure that that expansion funding would go to traditionally excluded groups. So it trained up groups, provided them capacity so that they could then be eligible to apply for those funds. So perhaps that's something we could build into ARPA. I too am happy about the oversight that we appear ready to correct this year to ensure that the library employees pay a minimum wage of $15 an hour across the board. I think that's a very important step that we're taking, because then we can speak with authority that all county employees make at least $15 an hour. And that is a powerful statement for this government to make, and a model that we can set for other large institutional employers in this community, which will hopefully follow our lead.
There you go. Commissioner Jensen? Oh, Commissioner Houle.
Thank you. First, just for everyone's benefit, I know we've gotten a lot of great documents from staff, but people who are wondering about this nonprofit capacity program, that first very large answer to questions we got from Manager Williams, page 11 explains it a bit, and then it refers to attachment 9, which is page 53. But that breaks down what the nonprofit capacity building program is about. One way or another, I hope we fund it. I'm hesitant to use ARPA money for it. And the reason why is we keep talking about ARPA, I feel, as if it's this bottomless well when it's not. And I don't want us to be using ARPA money, which is unsustainable, as a revenue source for things that we intend to sustain. And I think our capital deficits are those things, as well as programs that, we're funding as salaries. So I'm very hesitant to see that as a place to move a lot of revenue. especially considering Commissioner Parker's points about the process for ARPA. You know, we spent a lot of time painstakingly trying to map out how we would thoughtfully approach allocating that money and how other organizations and the community at large would be involved in weighing in on those decisions. So when we start talking about moving things like the nonprofit capacity building program to ARPA, I'm looking at, well, which ARPA bucket? And if we're talking about that miscellaneous bucket, that's going to disappear real fast. I mean, we already cut a lot of it out to cover the Bethel money. So I'm just cautious about that. And then the last thing I want to share is I really hope that we include language in our final proposal to clarify the library allocation, which I'm very glad that we're all in agreement on regarding amount. And also to address this wage compression study line item in some more detail. And I hope that we can bring up the wage floor for everyone, including part-time and seasonal, to that 1560 that we're adjusting to for the other positions. I think part of what we have to change about our structure is regarding part-time work as somehow less than, and the way to do that is make sure that we keep it on par this year like we did last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hool. Commissioner Denson?
Okay, thank you. I might go slightly over, but I'll try to go quick.
Okay.
So I just wanted to summarize, so I guess the question of, are we there? I feel like we're not, the biggest differences to me definitely are I don't want to rely on ARPA funding, especially for things that aren't one-time costs. I don't think it's sustainable, and we don't know where our economy is going to be going into the future. We know that we're going to have, because of the homestead exemptions going up, likely next year, cuts in revenue there. I don't think it's good for us to all of a sudden put on to us next year an extra few $1 million of operational funding that we're going to have. So the only things I am comfortable doing, if we're going to use ARPA, is going to be for one-time expenses, like the Leisure Services Master Plan. But even if we're doing that, I'm not comfortable with us in one discussion talking about budgeting two different very important funds. Our general fund, our overall budget, but we're also talking about how we're going to spend ARPA money, which we spent so much time trying to come up with a good process that was transparent and included input, but then all of a sudden, we're literally just like adding up to $1.7 million all of a sudden that we're going to spend off ARPA. I really feel like those are two different conversations. Anything that we're saying we're going to pay with ARPA here, we're basically saying we're not paying out of our budget. And then we need to take those things up separately as an ARPA discussion. Saying that, so why I like the proposal that I'm putting forward, there's still a millage rate decrease, bringing the total decrease to 0.6 mils, but it also fully funds labor requests at the most equitable one that brings everybody up to the highest point. Neighborhood leaders increase keeps it here in our actual budget, but it also makes sure that those neighborhood leaders are getting a pay increase and keeping their benefits, so it pays them at their full amount. This includes, I'll try to be quick, this includes moving $500,000 into the sheriff overtime fund, again, addressing one of the biggest issues that we heard from some of our constitutional officers. And I do think that we definitely need to have nonprofit capacity building. It's just necessary. And so I have that kept in here coming out of our fund. And and again, this is why I'm a little bit hesitant about the way that we went about this. Obviously, we all agree with these things, but if we're going to go ahead and fund all of the things that we talked about tonight and not take it out of ARPA, I mean, that's going to be an additional cost of $475,000 if we're talking about youth cadet program, neighborhood traffic, environmental study, corridor, and the east side safety. That adds up to $475,000. I am happy, if this body wants to include that into my draft. That, of course, is going to take away, for the most part, that extra tenth of a mil. So we just have to decide what are our priorities.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah,
Hey,
I'm good.
are you good?
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
okay.
I'm good.
I tend to agree with Commissioner Denson about utilizing ARPA funds. I also feel that they should be used for one-time expenses like the master plan. I kind of feel like the nonprofit capacity building could fall into that, in the idea that we spend this money helping these organizations build their capacity, and then they would be able to take advantage of ARPA to pull in more funds as well as other funding sources. So I feel like that's appropriate for ARPA money. And I already put forth my proposal for the Youth Cadet Corps. I feel like that is ARPA qualified, but it should be properly vetted in the public. And, you know, that's kind of where I am. I mean, I do agree that we need to be very focused on what falls into ARPA and what falls into legitimate general fund expense, and understand that ongoing expenses, establishing ongoing expenses will impact future budgets, which might not be in the state that our current budget is.
Thank you. Commissioner Parker.
It sounds like there's like a few things on this list that someone's willing to die on the hill of trying to get out of here. I mean, y'all know I have mine, but it feels like we're at a point mostly where we're just trying to determine how to fund this general list and whether to do it through ARPA or the general fund. I will say to that end that we can do really transformative things with ARPA that we cannot do with general fund dollars. We could give reparations in the form of home down payments to like descendants of slaves. Like that's an unprecedented and completely transformative thing that would never be able to happen through the general fund. Now I'm not saying that's what the people ultimately decide they want to do. I think that'd be sick, but I think we should really save that funding for stuff that like is above and beyond what a local government can normally accomplish. So yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. And Commissioner.
Alrighty, so as a collective body, I think we're almost there. I just think the biggest differences that we have, other than some of these minor projects, is where the money's gonna come from and millage rate reduction. So I think we are literally crossing that finish line. I'm all for I'm all for nonprofit capacity building, funding our library, and I like Commissioner Dixon's idea, his proposal that he put forth, but I think we're there. I really do. I just some minor dotting the i's and crossing the t's.
Commissioner Myers, I had one quick thing, please.
Bro.
So I just wanted to share something,
Commissioner
please,
Edwards.
Madam.
Yes.
Thank you. Just some information that we got from Manager Williams about our millage rate. I think it's always important to see what our peer communities are doing and getting done in their own communities. And, you know, just pointing out that Athens-Clarke County has a lower millage rate than Jackson County, has a lower millage rate than Augusta-Richmond, has a lower millage rate than Columbus-Muskogee, has a lower millage rate than Macon-Bibb, and also has a higher homestead exemption than all of those places except Columbia and Muskogee. But we will go way beyond them in November when we're having a 150% homestead exemption increase on the ballot this November, which will be a tremendous change to our taxation policy here. So the fact that we've been able to come together and say that, yes, we will be reducing our millage rate, which is already the lowest among our peer communities, and that this November we plan to have a 150% increase, more than double of our homestead exemption. I just wanted to throw that out there. I think, you know, we're doing a pretty good job.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards.
Thanks.
And now I'd like to give myself the 2 minutes really quickly here. I think that we actually are really close here. I hear, Commissioner Denson, what you're saying about your concerns about what you're looking at in the budget that you put together. I would suggest the one item that I feel fine with putting in the ARPA funds is the nonprofit capacity building, because we are working so much through the ARPA funds and through the categories we've already identified by a very thorough process with nonprofits, and so there's a direct connection there for me in that area. I also think that some of the newer items that have been brought up, there might be ways to adjust some of those costs. You know, I really appreciate the focus on traffic calming, the TPW, the Traffic and Public Works, suggested a 40,000 request. The mayor's budget had them at 25. This is at 160, and there might be able to make some adjustment there in some other areas as well. That's, you know, that's all I have to add on this. I do feel very close. I do feel that it is about the funding parts. I do feel that no matter which one of those budgets we're looking at, we're looking at things pretty responsibly. Oh, and I
Oh, were you
shouldn't
going to
go-
call on Commissioner Wright? Did she speak?
I thought she
She
passed.
said skip.
Pass.
She passed.
Well, I'm gonna
Okay,
pass.
Are we good now?
Can we go?
Does anyone have any last comment, or would someone like to make a motion to?
I make a motion.
I
that we
second.
adjourn.
You second? All in favor of adjourning? Aye. Okay, and just, let's make sure we get those CDOs in, 12 o'clock Wednesday. Good night, everyone.